All right, we want to welcome you to tonight's event. We are going to have a special speaker from CCU coming. He's here to talk to us about what it is, as far as what you can tell us about how to help your athlete make a decision on college sports. What are the expectations for a college athlete? How does what are the expectations for them in high school? What will be their expectation in college as far as like time management and things like that? But he's going to walk us through what he knows. He's been an athletic director for
year 4 at CCU.
But has also been coaching and a lot of other things at CCU. So please welcome Brian Wall.
Thanks much. It's great to be with all of you here tonight and those who are Zooming with us. So I want to welcome you. If it's okay, I'm going to go maskless tonight so you can actually hear me. I'll try and keep my 12-foot distance. And if anybody's uncomfortable, you can move to the back of the room, and I'll try not to get too close to anybody. I do want to just spend a little bit of time tonight talking through some of the issues that are surrounding what it looks like, particularly now in this new era of COVID, in becoming a college athlete. And I'll just preface my remarks tonight just with kind of a sad reality that with what the NCAA has done in terms of expanding eligibility for existing college athletes, it's changing the landscape a bit. And so all of that, as you may well know, began last spring as the seasons were really cut short in March. And so baseball, softball, track and field, golf, whatever spring sports were going on at that time essentially ceased. No postseason, no championships. And so the NCAA, rightly so, in my opinion, made the decision to give those collegiate athletes who were unable to finish the season an extra year of eligibility and the 2 semesters, because you only have 10 semesters as a college athlete to play your 8 semesters of eligibility athletically. So all that's wonderful, and at CCU we were celebrating. We had a couple of All-Americans that were coming back, and so we made that work from a scholarship standpoint. But if you think about it logically, and now with what's happened in the fall, with the NCAA having canceled fall postseason for all levels, the same scenario will unfold there again, and basketball is still hanging precariously by a thread. But if you think about the impact of that over time, it will begin to create a logjam, if you will. And so for your sons and daughters, potentially, who are seniors and even juniors, and heading into that funnel, the competitive level becomes a little bit more intensified, because now you have people that are playing longer that would normally have matriculated out, opening up scholarships and other roster spots on their respective teams. And so now that's changing. The other issue that I'm very concerned about is just the viability of some of the institutions that traditionally have been in operation. And so I'm hopeful that everybody can survive COVID, but if that doesn't happen, again, that would potentially shrink the number of opportunities. So that's the bad news. But what I want to share with you tonight, there's good news as well. And I want to give you hopefully some tools maybe that make sense that you can share with your sons and daughters as they prepare to enter into that more competitive funnel. So we'll begin with that, and I'll try and hit 3 areas tonight as you think about what it looks like for your son or daughter to compete at the next level. And that is, A, to be realistic. We'll talk about eligibility requirements. And then at the end, I'll try and hopefully give you a few practical ideas of what you can do as a family to most effectively market your son and daughter, because there's a marketing component now to college athletics from high school to college. So that's going to be where we start here with the piece about being realistic. So my wife and I have 4 now adult children. We have 11 grandkids, which I know I'm only 40. If any of you believe that, that's hard to imagine. It's not true. But we did have 4 adult kids, all of whom played college athletics. Several of our kids played at NAIA schools, and they actually played 2 sports while they were there. And so we've been through the process, which has changed somewhat since their experience. But one of the things that we learned early on is to really have a great understanding of the level at which your student athlete really is going to be able to play. And there are some things, we're talking about football, if we're talking about volleyball, there are just some metrics that coaches and programs are looking at physically from a size and strength and speed standpoint that are going to define what comprises a Division I athlete. Now, not 100% of the time, but there's a certain template that athletes need to fit to play at that level. When you get to Division II, that template expands a little bit. It's not nearly as selective as it obviously would be at Division I, and we'll talk more about that. But understanding, what kind of athleticism, what kind of drive really does your student athlete potentially possess? And those are helpful things. So it's always good to know, as you head into that junior and senior year, who is it that's expressing interest potentially in my athlete? What kind of schools are looking at them? That will give you a window. If they're competing on a club or an AAU team, someplace outside of their high school experience, having those honest conversations with those coaches. And again, filtering, because AAU coaches typically are going to paint the brightest picture they can, because it's always a good reflection on them, the more athletes they're able to place and find opportunities for collegiately. So you want to filter that. Your high school coach is also a great resource in giving a perspective, because they have less skin in the game. Obviously, yes, they want the best for your athlete, but they hopefully will be a bit more honest with you about their skill set. So looking for the honest evaluation, and ultimately, even from a college coach, I was talking with our men's basketball coach just the other day about this, and his approach is, I want to be as transparent as I possibly can with athletes and parents as I'm recruiting, because he doesn't want to set up a bait and switch situation. Not all coaches will look at it that way. Some coaches, because they do want your athlete to help build depth, might paint a bit of a rosier picture for what their experience could look like at that school than it may actually be. So you just need to be discerning and really ask those very penetrating questions as you're in that process. About 90% of athletes today are still primarily recruited through the club or their experience outside of high school. I hate that. As a former high school coach, I hate to even be the bearer of that news. But that is the reality, and that's not to say that their high school experience isn't important. It's very important. And the opportunities they have to grow as an athlete, to be a part of a team, phenomenal. And never to be, there's something special about that as a high school athlete. And there are certainly athletes that are recruited just from their high school teams, but the percentages tell us that many more of them are recruited at that level. And so as you think about your athlete and you think about where are they going to fit, are they going to play in college? What are the variables to really be considering, and what should you think about? Well, I would say athletics are phenomenal. Speaking as the athletic director of Colorado Christian University, I think that there's an amazing experience in the values and the challenges that an athlete has to overcome, set them up for life in ways that few other experiences can. So I'm going to tell you that right up front. Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to make sure you're awake. But there's an awful lot more to the college experience than just playing sports. And that's why it's really, really important to think through, what is it that I want to gain from college? What am I wanting to study? What kind of school do I want to go to? Is geographic area important? Do I want to be close? Do I want to go away? All those things are important. Just as you go through the college selection process, it's true as an athlete as well. How does my major area, my area of interest, how does that really fit into particular schools that I'm looking at? Do they have that major? If I want to be an engineer, I'd say don't come to CCU. I'm just tell you right up front, go to the Colorado School of Mines, go to CU, and then evaluate the athletic piece of it as well. And et cetera. I mean, that's a fairly obvious comment. But you'd be amazed at the number of student athletes, particularly, who are very tunnel visioned in their desire really just to play their sport, and sometimes don't always make the best decision in terms of the school that they end up selecting. The other thing I would urge you to think about with your son or daughter, what kind of athletic experience are they seeking? If they've been that athlete that's been a starter, that's been a very high performer on their high school team, in their club teams, if they go to a stretch school, are they really prepared to be number 13, 14? Are they prepared to work out every day and not really have a great playing experience. That's going to be very different than what they've experienced, and that may not be something that's good. It may turn into a mental health issue. For many athletes, that is real. And so having those honest conversations, I think, is important. What is it that you want out of this? If it's really, really important to play D1 and you can stretch and play D1 and not play, but be a part of that program, great. For some kids, that's really important, and that's okay. But know going in that that experience is going to be determined by the choice that's made. The other thing I would say, you know, looking, of course, at the school and the environment of the program within that, what kind of person do you want your son or daughter playing for? And that I would just give to you, irrespective of level. There are some phenomenal Division I coaches, phenomenal Division II coaches, phenomenal Division III coaches, NAIA coaches, JUCO coaches. There are some clinkers. There are some that I would not have wanted my sons and daughters playing for. And so to be penetrating in your questions as you make those decisions, you have those opportunities to get to know them, really, really urge you to do that, because that coach is ultimately going to have a very high impact in terms of the experience that your son or daughter has competing for them. The last thing I would say, just as you head into that process, and it may seem trite, but I can't say it loudly enough, really invite the Lord to walk you through it. He knows. He can help you see things that you can't naturally see. And we experienced that as a family, really sensed his direction along the way in a variety of situations where we were. But he cares so much about the experience that your son or daughter is about to have, and is delights to lead you as you ask him to do that. So just for some perspective, I happen to pick basketball because it's kind of a dramatic one. So this was a couple years ago, about 550,000 boys, this is just men's basketball, boys were playing high school basketball here in the US. So of that group, just over 17,000 of them became collegiate athletes at one of the levels. Okay, so that's about, as you can see, about 3.2%, which is kind of a sobering thought. You know, 3 out of every 100 boys will end up playing somewhere, not just Division I or II, but anywhere. And so then when you go beyond that, obviously Division I, just under 1%, Division II, 1.3%, NAIA or JUCO, 1%. And so then when you extrapolate that a little bit further, not to burst anyone's bubble, but I think it's an important thing to consider, not just true for basketball, but for many sports. You think about, when you think of all the professional opportunities, my youngest son had that opportunity for 7 years to play professionally in Europe. And so there were lots of different kinds of teams, some paid better than others, but none of them paid a lot compared to the NBA. But it was a professional experience because he was getting paid to do it, had a great experience, and he loved it. And he was blessed to be able to do that. But only 1.2% play anywhere professionally. That's China all the way to Australia, to Eastern Europe, wherever. And so just good to keep that all in perspective. Not that it's impossible, it can happen, but it's a pretty amazing experience when it does, when you look at the statistics. So when you think about, okay, now all this guy's done is give me bad news tonight. He's bursting my bubble everywhere. And I don't mean to do that, but I do want to be a realist. But when you think about from through the eyes of a college coach, and pick your sport, anything lacrosse, volleyball, baseball, softball, it really doesn't matter. But what are coaches looking for? My kid's a great kid. You know, he's a 4.0 student, great character, just a really, he's a leader. Those are all really good things, and coaches are looking for that. However, and I did this strategically, I'm still going to tell you that the first thing a coach is going to look for is athletic ability and the skills resonant within that ability to be able to compete at the level at which they're coaching. And so, to be honest, every college coach, if they have the opportunity to pick up a kid who's a stretch, I'm talking about a Division II coach, first of all. They can pick up a kid who's a stretch D1 kid. They're gonna look really hard at doing that, because they're gonna try and find the highest level athlete they can. Now, with all things being equal, and if your son or daughter has the athleticism to play at the level that that coach is coaching, now these other areas become very, very critical. The academic piece is huge, and I'll show you a stat here in just a minute. That coach very much so is looking for a student that's going to fit what their particular college or university has to offer, as well as meeting a team need. So maybe, and I'll just happen to camp on basketball for a minute since that's what I coach. But if your son is a tremendous point guard and he's going to school and he really wants to go to a school where the point guard is a sophomore, as freshman of the year, as their starting point guard as a freshman, was all conference, and they have another guy who's right behind him, that coach probably doesn't want to talk to you because he can't. He's going to have scholarship money already allocated to that position. Now, if your son were a three-point shooter and he happened to be a three-point shooter, he'd be very interested. Nothing personal. And all these things being equal, that's still a big need because many coaches are limited in terms of the scholarship dollars they have. We'll hit that in a minute too. Character, work ethic, teamwork, all those things are very, very critical. But understanding coaches first and foremost are going to look at that kid that has the ability and meets the need that they have on their team at that particular point. This is kind of an interesting graphic to think about. This is one you can preach to your kids, especially those who are freshmen and sophomores in high school. If you think about it, you know, given the different institutional requirements that colleges and universities have, if your son or daughter has a 4.0 GPA, then they, in theory, could be recruited by 94% of all schools in the country, because that works. There are some selective schools, Ivy League schools, where that still may not fly, but there are 3.5, they've decreased the pool a little bit just because of academic reasons and so forth. You can see how it goes down. Down to 2.0, there's only 8% of the schools in the country that could even recruit them. So academics are a big deal. So please hear that, even though I may say, maybe the athletic ability is huge, academics are right there with it. So again, most of you probably are very familiar with this, so forgive my redundancy if this is, but just to clarify. So the NCAA, National Collegiate Athletic Association, they're the big bad wolf in the news right now because they're the ones saying no, no, no in this time of COVID, but for obvious reasons. They have 3 different divisions in NCAA athletics. There's Division I, which we all know is, of course, going to be focused primarily on athletics. If your son or daughter has Division I talent and they make that choice and they have the Division I passion, they need to understand that what they're going to go into is a program that will own them. They will be told when they get up, they will be told when they go to bed, they'll be told what to eat and when to practice and how much and so on and so forth. That's just the nature of Division I athletics. Even at the mid-majors, that's going to be a reality. And so for some, they love that. They thrive on it. You know, and that's a great thing. Division II is going to be a little different from the standpoint still seeking to provide the highest competitive opportunity they can athletically. But Division II's mantra is life in the balance, meaning that we want you to have a really competitive experience as a collegiate athlete. We also want you to get a great education. So we want to balance your schedule in such a way that allows you to do both and still to have a college experience relationally and with things that go on. So Division II is going to look a little bit different. As you see every year, you have Division II teams competing with Division I teams. Sometimes Division II teams win. So it's not as if the competitive level isn't as high, but it's going to look different. Division III is a much more of an emphasis on academics. However, I think one of the slides I have will show you that a division in Division III, even though they cannot give cannot give athletic money, about 3/4 of the student athletes playing in Division III are getting scholarships. So obviously they're recruiting athletes as well. NAIA would be the smaller schools. There's both a Division I level in NAIA, Division II. Division I NAIA schools typically have more scholarship money available than do Division II schools. But there's a lot of opportunities there. And then of course the junior colleges are typically preparatory, either academically or physically, athletically, or both, in hopes that athlete then is ready to make the jump into Division I or II as they go forward. Yes, please.
How do in Division I, how do they balance athletics with the academics? You can't just do emphasis on athletics, period. I mean, you gotta get a 4.0 GPA to be considered. There has to be some criteria for the academics there
Yeah.
as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And so that's a great question. And a lot of what happens, especially in Division I, the academic resources available to support athletes are voluminous. I had a good friend that was working up at CU with the football team, and his responsibility was to oversee the academic support program for football and I think lacrosse at CU. He had a staff of 10 or 12 people. And so constantly then those folks, but it gets back to my point, they're surrounding athletes, but they'll say, look, while NCAA has CARA hours, countably related athletic hours. Okay, so those are the CARA hours. You're limited to 20 hours a week, and those are lifting, it's on-field workout or on-court workout or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, there are other workarounds that are voluntary. But when it comes to academics, they can also say these would not be countable hours. You're going to be at study table for 3 hours a night. And so that's then when the resource folks come in and make sure that they're keeping up and they're getting papers written, et cetera. So that's a big way that they do it. It's very much a micromanaged environment, but it's micromanaged to help athletes be successful on the field and court, but also to stay eligible, especially, and hopefully to graduate. Because coaches, that's a big deal when it gets to the recruiting piece. If I can sit down and say, look, 80% of my athletes are actually graduating from my program, that speaks volumes, as opposed to the coaches as well, about half of our kids get done. That doesn't play well. So they have a vested interest in that as well. That's a great question. So total number of schools, you can see the most would be in Division III. Division I has 357, and 1 out of every 25 Division I students is an athlete, which is pretty amazing to think about. Now, there's a lot of what would be called minor sports, that would funnel into that as well. But still, that's a significant amount. But when you compare that with Division II, where it's 1 in 11, about 10% of Division II athletes, students on campus are athletes. NAIA, that number gets even bigger, 1 in 6. And many NAIA schools are dependent, and their lifeblood is in their athletics. And I say that this is a word of encouragement. They're looking to recruit athletes because that's how they maintain their enrollments. And they have allocated money. Some of them have JV programs even just to bring athletes in. But for a lot of the NAIA schools, that is, athletes are lifeblood. You may see schools where over 50% of their student body are athletes. And so that creates another set of dynamics, but it is a reality. And for a potential student athlete, that's a great thing to realize. And so you can see then NCAA number of schools. As I said earlier, there's concern about the number, particularly of NAIA and Division II schools that are really feeling the pinch right now because of COVID and enrollment declines and that kind of thing. My prayer is that they'll be able to survive, because it's not going to be the best thing for a population if they don't. So scholarships, certainly Division I typically would have the greatest amount of money available. However, I would say that is based a little bit upon their sport. So certainly you think about football or basketball, some of the sports that are more out front, yes. The NCAA sets limits in terms of the number of scholarships.
Oh, it's Liz. Hi there. Hey, do you have a second? Okay, I don't want to call Jen dinner. I'm like looking at the clock and I'm like, I
some feedback.
just wanted to let you know that I did have a chance to
the number of scholarships each sport
just
can
because
give.
I know you've seen them before and all that.
So Division
he
I,
said, he goes, when she's done with Invisalign, have her come in. I think there's some work that we should do on those, but he didn't want to do anything until you
But a
were
lot
done
of
with
the
Invisalign.
NCAA marquee programs are fully funded.
Like
There
he's
are other
talking about the
programs
front
may not be.
ones. Because he said it looks like there are some cavities around,
there's a
even
much greater
like just some of the
proportion
work
those sports that are
that you've had
partially
done in the
funded,
past,
meaning
which
that,
is typical because when there's
let's take
crowding,
basketball, for
that's what
example,
happens. The
an easy one.
bacteria kind of gets
So
stuck
there
there.
may be
And so,
10
like I said,
scholarships
when the
allowed.
teeth start to unravel, we can just see more than we've
Full
seen. So
rides.
it's actually good because we can catch it earlier than if you didn't have things straightened out.
So they would get 10.
Because usually when things are crooked, we don't find it for a long time because that is developing in there. We can't see it.
They are going to allocate that much money for those 10 scholarships or not. And so if they've gone to a partial funding model, obviously they have to divide that number of scholarships up. And you're going to get a lot more partial scholarships. And we'll talk about other ways that those schools make up the difference in just a minute. Division III, as I mentioned, no athletic scholarships per se, but there's an awful lot of athletes that are playing D3 that are recruited as athletes. And they somehow find academic money to take care of those athletes that they're recruiting. And so technically it's academic scholarship. They get it because they fit the athletic need at that time, about 3/4. NAI schools we've talked about, and JUCOs have some athletic aid available, but typically those are much less expensive schools, and a lot of those students are still paying their way. So
Make sure
basic
we're all
recruiting rules,
muted, please.
things that you need to be aware of, especially now with if you have juniors and seniors. June 15th, after your athlete's junior year, is the first time that they can be formally recruited. There can be, your athlete can reach out and so forth. That they can use. So an official visit versus an unofficial. Official visit means that the school is paying for all the expenses, travel, meals, hotel, etc., just for the athlete. So you, for example, in an official visit could accompany your student athlete to that institution, but you would have to pay your own expenses with that. Your athlete would be covered at that point. If you are interested in capturing something you can take with you, please grab a screenshot of this. This is the NCAA Eligibility Center. And it's really critical. In fact, if your athlete is a freshman in high school, anytime beyond that, and they're interested potentially in playing college athletics, they will need to register with the NCAA Eligibility Center. And so this is where you can log on and do it. It's probably a 30-minute process, and it'll cost you about $75. But once you get registered with the Eligibility Center, they'll look at two things. Their job is to verify your son or daughter's amateurism, and ultimately then their grades, their academics, their GPA. And so we still are working through at CCU, as all colleges are this time of year, getting the final number of our kids cleared through the Eligibility Center. They got a late start. They're still looking for a transcript somewhere, whatever. All that has to be done before they're cleared then to play. So they, in fact, just to clarify, they could sign a scholarship or a national letter of intent prior to being fully cleared with the Eligibility Center, but they can't be recruited until they've registered. So they may not be fully cleared to play, but they can certainly commit and do all those things once they've been enrolled. So the Eligibility Center, again, is looking at these things. You can see kind of the fees, and again, that's NCAAEligibilityCenter.org. So, and this is something I know that the counselors here do a phenomenal job in terms of just guiding your athletes through the process of what requirements they need to meet academically in order to be eligible. But just as a review pretty quickly, if they're looking to play any sports, any level, NCAA level, in August of 2021, so a year from now. They must have graduated from high school. That makes sense. They need to have completed 16 core courses, which would mean 10 before their 7th semester. And core courses would be English, math, science specifically. And then the minimum GPA 2.3, and that would be just as an admission possibility to be a full qualifier. And then to have earned an SAT or an ACT score that meets the sliding scale piece, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So the beautiful thing here is, in order to graduate, I suspect from Parker Lutheran, they're going to have to well exceed all of these. And so that's the comfort that you have. That's part of the perk of being here in this setting. You're blessed to not have to worry about a lot of those things, but that is where the NCAA would land. This is a sliding scale I mentioned, and the numbers are not nearly as important as to realize the relationship, the correlation. So the higher the test score, it can mean the lower GPA for admission. The higher the GPA, then the test score can be lower. So those are inversely correlated. But the important thing to realize too is, the higher the test score, the higher the GPA, very likely the higher the academic award that they're going to qualify for. And that gets coaches' attention. Because if you have a son or daughter who maybe fits in potentially to a program and they're competing with somebody else, but they can actually earn more academic money because of their grades and their test score, a coach is going to be really excited to recruit them over somebody who might have a similar ability, a similar fit, but it's going to cost that coach more from his athletic scholarship budget in order to be able to recruit that student athlete. So that's where grades really do make a difference. So again, the academic requirements would be, in order to be eligible, freshman year at college would be 3 years of English, high school English, 2 years of math, 2 years of science, 2 years of social studies, and then the electives beyond that. So again, nothing really surprising about that here. Just some language that you might hear thrown around from time to time, this idea of being a qualifier, a full qualifier versus a partial qualifier. So a full qualifier means that they are college bound. They can, as soon as they step on campus, when it's time, they can practice, they can receive athletic scholarships during their first year of enrollment. They're ready to go. So they're fully eligible. And that means they've completed the 16 core courses. They've earned a GPA of at least a 2.2, an ACT that matches their core course qualifying. They've graduated, just like what we said. That's the full qualifier. There could be partial qualifiers who meet most of these, but not all of them. It could be a non-qualifier. A partial qualifier is able to practice, and they can receive a scholarship, but they cannot compete. A non-qualifier cannot receive a scholarship, cannot practice, cannot compete. So those are fairly intuitive, I would think. So takeaways from tonight, what I would say, being just what you can do today, which is very simple, is to register at the Eligibility Center and get that process going so that everything's taken care of. And certainly and know what the admissions requirements are, know what the programs are of the schools that potentially your son or daughter is looking at. So, okay, it could be an athletic fit, but not an academic fit. It could be a great academic fit, but there's no spot to play. So that's really the fun road that you get to navigate over these next couple of years, is to figure out that match. And that's where the Lord's pretty good at helping guide you. So once athletes are admitted to college, what do they have to do, to stay eligible? Well, it's pretty easy, really, I think, and yet inevitably there's some that struggle with that. Maintaining a 2.0, so C average. They must always attempt 12 credits a semester and pass 9. They have to pass 24 credits in a calendar year to maintain their eligibility for the next year. And so you could have a student that's taking 12 credits, they struggle with one and fail a course, so they earn 9. Well, that means they've got to pick up 15 next semester or 12 and take one over the summer. So that's the process. And then full-time enrollment is 12 credits. To be eligible to play, they have to be enrolled full-time. So the last area that I'll hit tonight is making yourself marketable. So to start that out, I'll tell a story. My son was playing actually at CCU for 2 years. He was playing a third year and was injured. So he earned a medical red shirt, meaning that he played few enough number of games at that point, was unable to finish the season, and so the NCAA gave him another year of eligibility. Much like a COVID red shirt, he was a medical red shirt. It just so happened that after that medical redshirt year, his coach left. And so he was in a quandary, what do we do? And I said, well, what's important to you? So we went through hopefully the questions that you'll go through with your sons and daughters. And I said, okay, let's imagine that we're starting out. And now the only difference is you now know, you've had 3 years of collegiate experience, so you know what it's about. So taking what you've experienced and what you now know, if you were starting over because you really have 2 years left, what do you want to do? So we really just began to sit down, and we actually created a matrix, a decision-making matrix, and it was great because it forced him to really say, what are my priorities? And so I really want to play in a winning program. That was important to him. I said, okay, that's helpful. And I said, I really want you to be in a Christian environment. And he said, yeah, you wanted that too. So we began to come together and put our priorities together and started talking through and list them out. And so as it turned out, CCU is a Division II program, and so he had some experience. And I said, well, do you want to try and walk on somewhere as a Division I player? He said, no, I don't think that's realistic. I said, I don't either, quite honestly. Just knowing what I don't think you'll enjoy it very much. You'd always been used to playing. I said, so let's not worry about that. So now let's take a look and say, well, what are the potentially Christian options in Division II that are, let's start with west of the Mississippi. Selfish dad talking at that point. He's like, okay. So he was willing to do that. And so we began to walk through the process. And I said, well, why don't you just shoot an email out to the coaches and just tell them, hey, you're interested in making, he had gotten his release to be able to talk with other schools, and that's part of it too. Sorry, it's warm in here. I know everybody, I can feel it. So he did that and went through the process, and it ended up having an opportunity to try out at 4 different schools, which was great. And so he did, and some of the coaches knew him because he had competed against them, so that was a real help. But the fact that he actually made those visits, did the tryouts, got to know the team, got to know the coach, is something that you can replicate with your student athlete. And that's something that made all the difference in the world. And as it turned out, he made a great decision, had a phenomenal experience his last 2 years, played in a very competitive program, was in a spot where he had the ability to go on and play professionally after that, in large measure because of the connections of his college coach. And so that coach that you choose is critical, the program you choose is critical, and the fit is critical. So how do you get to that point? Well, sometimes it's as simple as an email, not always. But obviously, like we've already seen tonight, it's understanding that it's a competitive process. There's thousands of people. I talked with our student athletes, some of them today. I said, literally, I'm going to talk with folks tonight whose kids would give anything to be sitting where you're sitting today, because you have an opportunity. Not everybody gets that. So realizing that that's there. And so everybody's goal is to be able to play at that level if they're in this pool. So separating yourself from the pack by eliminating obstacles for your head coach. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And then obviously, I just am the biggest proponent of getting in front of that coach. I'm still convinced that's the #1 thing you can help your student athlete do. So if a particular school is doing a prospect camp and it's too expensive, because sometimes they are, if your son or daughter really wants to be at that school, if that's really important to them, and if you feel like realistically, I think that could be a fit, then it's probably worth making that investment. That could be really, really valuable. If there's an opportunity, where you have had dialogue and the coach issues an invitation to come try out, jump on that. Move heaven and earth to make it happen. Really, really valuable to get to that point. So eliminating the obstacle for the head coaches. So in order to recruit a player, obviously, there are some things that coaches are going to need. They're going to simply need contact information. You laugh at that, but you'd be surprised at the kind of requests that come into coaches. Just thinking about CCU, I mean, our coaches get hundreds of inquiries, but sometimes they don't have all the information they needed. And of course, that never even gets looked at. So just the basic contact information for you and your athlete. ACT, SAT scores, as soon as those are ready, coaches will need that because it tells them a lot. GPA, they need that. Class rank, if you have it at the time, all those things factor in because they make a difference in terms of the academic money that might be available. A proper game film, and it varies obviously sport to sport what that looks like, and we'll get into what that is in just a minute, but there are game films that could be impactful, especially now, and depending on what happens with COVID, if coaches again get shut down and can't go out and recruit face-to-face, then those game film become much more important, much more valuable. Even irrespective of that, sometimes just that 2 or 3 minute glimpse at an athlete, because they're never going to look at the whole film. Most coaches don't have time to do that. Sometimes the GAs will, sometimes the assistant coaches will, but getting that game film in their hands is also helpful. Obviously, up-to-date stats and the desired degree. So coaches need to know all those things, and if you'd like to grab that, you certainly can. So once you know what coaches are looking for and provide them with the information, how do you then get it to them? Well, let's talk about the game film. So game film, obviously, in most sports are looking for a small highlight clip. You know, if it's offensive lineman, we're going to look at his blocks. If it's, you know, whatever, pick your sport, you're going to see highlights, and that's important, but that's really not all that important. I mean, you need it, but that's not what's going to do it. Look for a best offensive half, a best defensive half, or inning, or whatever it is that relates here. They're looking for a complete game. So if your son or daughter is a pitcher, for example, they'll look at that. Some of the sports are much easier to recruit. Golf. What are coaches going to do when they recruit a golfer? You know, go to GolfStat and say, oh, this kid's rated number 200 in Colorado. This one's rated number 500 in Texas. Oh, I got to have this kid. I mean, my golf coaches are telling me that all the time. We just go to GolfStat. They rarely go out of Colorado. Kids always come into campus, and they recruit them, and that's it, because they know right there, he scored here, here, or here, very black and white. What are track and cross country coaches looking at? Oh, he ran a 4-minute mile, or whatever. I mean, it's pretty easy to see that. So if you are blessed with, or cursed, depending how you look at it, with a son or daughter who's in one of those black and white sports, you know pretty clearly what that coach is going to need, and it won't necessarily hinge on a game film. Now, there's more to it than that, and they're certainly looking at character, and they're certainly looking at academics. But from an evaluation standpoint, it's much easier to evaluate some of those sports. So looking again at a complete game, and then obviously making that game film accessible, and there's, of course, multiple ways to do it, whether it's YouTube or Huddle or whatever, lots of ways to get there. Here's another fundamental mistake that a lot of athletes don't think about when they're creating their game film. Be sure you identify who your kid is. You laugh, but I can't tell you the number of times my coach said, look at this film. I don't know who's this kid. I don't even know what team is he playing for. Is he white? Is he blue? What's this? What number is he? So just simple things like that can help you separate from a portion of the pack. This is an example. This again happens to be a basketball example, but just of a little resume sheet. One page is great, and obviously sports specific, but just giving those key information items that we talked about here, make it really simple, send it in, email it, and again, it's a real easy way to give that coach a snapshot of where your student athlete is. So finally, I would say be sure and complete the FAFSA as soon as you can. That's going to be typically January of your athlete's senior year, the first time, because even depending on your situation, you might be surprised at the money that you qualify for. And this will sound funny, but the more expensive the school that your son or daughter is going to, the more likely they would be to get FAFSA aid. That's not a guarantee they'll get it, but all those things factor into the various equations. But irrespective of that, even if you don't get institutional or federal aid because of the FAFSA, your school is still going to look at that before they award a final package. They're going to have to see that. So FAFSA is the federal student aid money. Never assume you don't qualify for FAFSA money. Pell Grants may or may not apply. That's a financial need-based situation. And obviously, again, like we said, the sooner you can get that in when you have your tax information back, again, it just allows schools to finalize that final award, especially if they're not getting a full ride athletically. Then everything else that you get will determine, yeah, we can do this, or oof, yeah, I'd love for you to go to Pepperdine, but it's just not going to happen, or whatever the school happens to be. So financial aid packages, again, remember that most schools will stack money. So whether it's free money in terms of scholarships coming from whatever place, maybe your kid gets a left-handed scholarship, that will stack. Academic scholarships stack. Athletic scholarships stack. Everything stacks. And then, of course, the loans that are part of that as well can factor in there. I think we've hit most of them. that's the final thing I would say, is to confirm with coaches how institutions will stack. Because some do it differently. Some stack everything, others don't. Others say, well, if you get athletic money, you don't get academic money, or vice versa. So it's good to know that. And obviously, the more they stack, that's certainly to your advantage. So I want to just take time, 5 minutes, look at that. We made it, 45 minutes, that's pretty good. Just want to give you a chance to ask any questions that you might have about anything that I said or didn't say. Yes, sorry.
So going back to that page where you had all the number of official visits and stuff.
Yeah.
You had on there one tryout. Is that tryout per school?
Per school. I'm sorry, yeah, per school.
Is that tryout something that the school funds, like an official visit, or is that something that's online done?
Yeah, good. Well, it depends. That's a great question. So the tryout could be a part of an unofficial visit. It could be a part of an official visit. So if the coach invites your son or daughter to come and try out, and they say, hey, we'd really like you to make this an official visit, they're going to pay for everything that pertains to your athlete. But if a coach says, hey, we'd love to have you come try out, you may say, well, I don't want it to be an official visit, but I'm interested enough to go, then that would be on you. Prospect camps typically would happen in the off season, summer, spring, depending on the sport, fall, whatever. And so at that point, most schools will have that advertised on their web that they're having a prospect camp. Some of them, the more elite prospect camps, will be by invitation only. Others are going to be open. And so there again, you want to look at that. And I would say only do the prospect camps of those schools that you would think, yeah, this is something we would want to consider potentially. The value there is, again, whether you're talking about baseball or basketball or football or lacrosse, it doesn't matter. Whatever the prospect camp is, getting your son or daughter face to face with that coach is invaluable. And it's definitely so they can see them play, but also so they get to know them. Because there are some of your athletes, I'm sure, are filled with personality that's captivating. And there's something to be said for that. Coaches resonate with that. So that's a very great question. Yes.
Is there somewhere that you can go that, like, so my daughter's basketball and track, we don't film the game. So how do we put game film together, and where do we go to learn about applications that would do that?
So there's a couple of options that you have. First, I would be knocking on Mark's door and telling him, hey, can you help us? And he typically will, he'll at least be able to get you the game film, because I'm sure he's filming every game. And so at that point, he can probably ship you some films, and you can cut and paste and do your editing that way and create your own if you're so inclined and like that. Sometimes the kids really enjoy doing that. It just depends. There are obviously services out there that will do that for you. They'll help you. They'll do most of what the services do. The recruiting services will do the things we just talked about tonight. And if you're more comfortable with them putting a really nice professional touch, and that's of value to you, great. They'll do it en masse. They'll walk you through it, and they'll charge a significant amount of money to do that. And sometimes that's worth it. But you can do it yourself. You can do a service. Sometimes your coach will work with you. The thing I didn't say, and I want to be sure and say this before I go tonight, your coach, your son or daughter's coach is really, really important. As I talk with our coaches, I talk with coaches throughout the RMAC and around the country. If they get a call from a coach, that goes a long way. And particularly, they may know a program, and they may know this kid's coming out of a good program, and so that coach has a louder voice. So it's really important, and your coach can really help you at any sport sometimes penetrate that difficult barrier with the college coaches. Great questions. Anybody else? Well, good. Let me pray for you if I could, and ask the Lord just to direct your steps. That's an exciting time, and I would just say, enjoy the process. It can feel like there's some irritations along the way, but if you have the opportunity to go through and walk through it with your son or daughter, it's really a lot of fun, and it's a really exhilarating process. So enjoy it. So Lord, I thank you for each of these parents and the student athletes that are represented here tonight. Lord, I ask that you would direct them, you would give them wisdom, you'd direct their steps, you'd give them a perspective to be able to understand and see kind of the giftings that you place within their sons and daughters, as well as the passions. Finally, Lord, I just ask that you would bring people alongside of them that can also help them walk through this journey. And they just, you would give them real clarity in terms of the best situation for their students. So we thank you for that in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, let's thank Brian for coming today. It was great information. Just before you go, I know we got to get out of here. For class, for the period, happening very soon. Just a reminder to make sure you grab Vision 1 or Vision 2 information on your way out. Sign up if you did not sign up. And then Mrs. Knox, do you want to add something real quick?
Yeah, FAFSA is now open in October of senior year. So October 1st of senior year is when you can get started. I wouldn't submit it the first week because there might be some bugs in the program, but you can get started filling out the form October 1st of senior year.
So, yeah, so have a great day. If you have any questions, you can contact me here at the school. Aaron is going to see and introduce myself first.